Morning. The House has resumed. The House is considering the first reading of the Sentencing Aggregating Factors Amendment Bill. The Honourable Nanaia Mahuta has the call and about 6 minutes remaining, should she wish to avail herself of that opportunity. If not, is some other member seeking the call?
Speaker.
Jonathan Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased to stand and speak in support of the Sentencing Aggravating Factors Amendment Bill. Mr. Speaker, we do have a superb police force and corrections force in our country, and it is very important and imperative that as a government that we back up these men and women who on a daily basis put themselves in harm's way for the protection of our society. And Mr. Speaker, we ought not to be negligent in these matters. And so this bill is to include an offence against a police or prison officer acting in the course of his duty as an aggravating factor at sentencing. That means, Mr. Speaker, it will be taken into account in regard to the sentencing that this is a more serious crime. We have in the past seen many situations over the last 4 or 5 years where such situations of risk have occurred and where men and women who serve our country have been injured and some have sadly lost their lives. Between 2005 and 2009, the total assaults on police increased by a third, from 1,869 to 2,481, while serious assaults increased 38% from 298 to 304. These are significant numbers, Mr. Speaker. I think what's also interesting at this point in time is that we are also very thankful that crime has decreased. In this last year, 6.7% decrease. However, across the whole country, however, at the same time, we are finding that assaults against police have increased. It would seem to me, Mr. Speaker, that we have a very effective police force who are our thin blue line, who are standing as the buffer between law breakers and law-abiding citizens. Therefore, it is our imperative that we strengthen their stance. We back them up with legislation and laws that will protect them. I know the opposition have made or laid the claim that increasing or putting this law in place, making it a mandatory consideration in sentencing, will not change the situation. I totally disagree with that, Mr. Speaker. I believe that it's incredibly important that we back up our men and women in blue with such laws. It's very interesting, the term, the thin blue line. Where did it come from? It came from the thin red line. Interesting, isn't it? Back in the Crimean War, when the British and Turks were standing against a Russian cavalry with numbers very depleted, instead of having 4 in rank, they only had 2. And when the Russian cavalry charged them, they saw such a thin red line that they thought, indeed, this is a ploy. In fact, it's a diversion and it is a trick. And behind them stood what they perceived huge ranks of reinforcements. And so because of that, they turned back. And Mr. Speaker, our thin blue line need to have reinforcements, not figments of imagination, not this is what the courts may do if they want to do, but we need to have solid reinforcements behind the men and women who stand on that thin blue line in our nation, and that is legislation that will indeed protect them, indeed will send the message to those who find it an easy thing to consider disrespecting authority and attacking those people who uphold the law, that we as a country will not tolerate that sort of behaviour. Police and corrections staff play a vital role in keeping us safe in our communities. It's important that we continue to support that. Mr. Speaker, we have heard many tragic situations that have taken the breath away from the people of New Zealand, as we have seen pictures of these fine men and women who have been assaulted. I went out with the New Plymouth Police one Friday evening not so long ago, and we went around all the different places where perhaps infringement of law and breaking of law takes place, and I was incredibly impressed with the calibre of the New Zealand Police. And we need to realise that these men and women, at the end of their day, they go home, they are ordinary citizens, and we need to have laws in place that protect them, and laws that state that an assault against a police officer, against a corrections officer, is a serious factor that will be taken into consideration when it comes to sentencing. Mr. Speaker, I am very happy to support this legislation as it proceeds in the House.
Mr. Speaker.
Honourable